we go there, yes, let's talk about a little bit of division business. I didn't warn anybody, but I'll call on some of the officers and directors. Giuseppe, can we start with you? Is there anything from your perspective that we need to know from a wider regional perspective? Can't hear you.
You're muted.
There he is.
There you go. Since our last meeting, we had a special board of director meeting, and it covered two topics. One, to change the manual of operation specifications as to who's in charge of paying for the contest awards. And it was voted to make PCR itself liable for the awards expenses. That frees monies for convention committees, and especially for our committee for this convention this year. So that was welcome.
Yeah.
The second one was a discussion on combining superintendent and director positions. And it was decided that each division will have the ability to choose what they want to do for that election term. So some divisions want to, like Coast, want to incorporate superintendent and director in the same position. RAD hasn't decided yet. We'll have to talk about it. As far as the election for director, this already has happened, so we will have to wait until the next term. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Any questions about that from anybody? Dave Grunman, quick review of our financial standing, which I assume is largely unchanged.
It is unchanged. We have a current balance of $5,215.80.
Excellent. Gus, thank you for your work on membership. Where do we stand there?
We have 110 current members according to the January roster.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Scott Lockhart does a marvelous job editing our call board and gathering information, including some stuff from this call that will be part of the next issue. Anything we need to know about deadlines and submissions and what kind of things you're looking for, Scott?
I would like a deadline probably this next Friday coming up. I'd like to get the next call board out, probably next week. Like next weekend if possible. So if you have any submissions, director's reports, superintendent's reports, etc., or if you have anything you want to share, please feel free to contact me at my email address, and I'll put that in chat. Thank you.
That would be the 20.
Possible grandfather nicknames, is that an appropriate article or?
Sure it is.
Oh, yes.
We can have a poll.
Hey, Denny, careful. Excellent. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate what you do. The call board's excellent.
Thank you.
Convention report. Okay, I'm ready. Lay it out. Denny and Cliff, we appreciate what you do. Before you blast me, I just want you to know we appreciate you.
I'm not going to say a word about it.
Okay.
It's been said.
We're not going to mention that. You're not going to be there.
Ouch. An overview on where things stand. Anything we need to know about the convention?
We're doing really well with all the planning. We have 31 clinics committed, and some of those are from people from out of state that are coming in just to put on clinics for us at our convention. So that's pretty awesome. We have 20 layout tours that have committed to opening up their layouts for us, and we have 7 operating sessions signed up. The signups for actually operating those will start in March, and that'll be on the website, so people can start doing that. We definitely need more registrations. We're really low on registrations. We have 115 as of this morning. So we really need to get people to sign up. The excursions, we've sold almost enough tickets on the excursions to break even on those, except for the Corbel Winery one, which we will probably end up canceling for lack of interest, but we will provide information to people for that. And I'm gonna see if I can get like discount tickets for tastings or whatever, so that people that still want to go they can do it on their own. We'll give them a map and how to get there and all of that so that they don't miss out. Let's see what else. Convention cars are now being sold on the AccuRail website. They've listed it under their new releases. And we sold one from that already, I believe, from somebody in the Netherlands, but we're having issues with getting it shipped. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a sale or not. But anyway, we do have a couple other places other than our website where people can buy the car, and you can go on to the registration site and there's a spot there where it says, I just want to buy a convention car. So anybody that wants to just buy cars can do that without registering for the convention. What else? Chris Palermo has agreed to come and speak at the banquet. So he'll be our guest speaker. He's going to talk about all the changes that are happening at NMRA, and there's lots of them, and he will take questions. And then we're also going to have a Q&A session with the PCR Board of Directors, our little Meet the Board session, and that will also be at the banquet. So everybody, we wanted to do it at the banquet so that everybody has a chance to address the board. So if you have any questions for the PCR Board of Directors, that will be your opportunity to talk to them. Other than that, we just need people to sign up. So encourage people. I know COVID has been kind of slowing everything down. People are hesitant. But now that things are starting to open up again, we're hoping that, that's going to encourage people to register. So that's where we at.
Yeah, it's much easier to imagine a very enjoyable, robust convention with the mask mandates relaxed.
Yes. Yes.
So talking about good planning, well done, guys, that you got that to land right in the right place. Because even though many believe we're not all done, it certainly looks like we'll be done for the foreseeable future, and that's fantastic. That really bodes well. And I think in many ways, this is the first major event that can enjoy that kind of more relaxed atmosphere. So, amen.
Thank you.
Any questions or concerns about the convention anybody wants to raise?
A reminder about the dates.
April 21st through the 24th.
Thank you.
Although we will be there, the official date is the 21st, and that's Thursday. Wednesday, we will have registration open in the afternoon from 4 to 7. And there will be a welcome reception from 7 to 9 that evening for everybody to kind of get together, and it's a no host bar, but everybody can kind of get together and catch up and say hi for the first time in 3 years. And
Excellent. Well, planning a convention is thankless. Thank you, guys. Even though never mind. Okay, I think that concludes the business of the division for now, unless I missed something or anybody has anything to add. And not that the convention update wasn't fun, but now we can get to the fun part. I mentioned we have 8 speakers today. As has been my desire for the last couple of meets that we've had, I've invited some guest speakers from just beyond our own division, because so many of these guys are our neighbors and doing interesting work, and we don't always get to see them in the ordinary course of business. Those 2 guest stars today are Jim Radke, who's normally in Albany, just over the Richard Sammerfeld Bridge. However, he's not there today. He'll explain. And a return engagement by popular demand, Michael Latant and his deep dive into South Boston, which sounds irrelevant to a lot of our interests, except people have been glued to the screen, as Michael has talked about his journey being the expert on a few square blocks in South Boston. So Jim Radke, if you're ready, and understand you're sitting on a little red wagon, don't fall down. But if you're stable in a seating sense, then you've got the floor. And you're muted in case you're not intending to be, Jim. Yes, sir. You're muted. Much as I enjoy muted Jim Radke, it's not what we had enough. Can anybody hear Jim?
No.
No.
unmute.
there a
There
way-
you go. Okay, can
Oh,
everybody?
there
see
you are.
my
Yes, thank you.
screen?
No, it's so much better with your dulcet tones. Thank you.
Yeah, it's better muted. You guys love it that way. Can you just click-
I liked you being muted, but others were bored. So
I assume you can see my screen, right?
indeed,
Okay, so this is the BNSF Burlington Northern Santa Fe Pink Lady subdivision progress report. I put on a new 8 foot by 8 foot by 21 feet extension onto the room and started rebuilding. Okay. Slideshow is not working. There we go. Okay, one of the big things I wanted to get rid of is that the aisles were really narrow and crowded. You might recognize a couple of these people as we go. There was no place to set anything. Okay, so I wanted to change many things, and just the aisles were really crowded. There were duck unders for anybody under 5'11". Well, the aisles were really crowded. Okay, this was during a convention. We were running off of a generator in my driveway. So what I wanted to do is I definitely wanted wider aisles. I wanted more distance between towns, better access to staging. Staging tracks needed to be uniform because the staging on top was longer than the staging on the bottom. And people really had trouble dealing with that. There was a very steep grade out of my yard where the cars would keep coming uncoupled and coming back into the yard. And I wanted to make it so the operators didn't have to fight each other to get to what they were doing. And I have a Pink Lady mine on the railroad, which people used to stand up on a bench to work. So I wanted to bring that down to a lower level.
Hello.
I reached almost all these goals. Here's some pictures of what's been going on. This is my upper staging. I built it from the old railroad, so I recycled a lot of stuff. This is on the garage floor of the new extension. And this is what it looks like when it's up. Trying to put this up with my wife and my teenage son was an experience. Can you see the cursor, guys?
yes.
There is a black mark right here above the door, which I put up on the door, and that was the top elevation of this. Well, when you're shoving something up from the bottom, you usually can't see the top. So we kept shoving until we saw the black mark. So the staging went much higher than it was supposed to, but it worked out in the end. So I've made lower staging, and you can see that they go into a nice big loop here. They come around and it goes like that. I found out that I can get bigger aisles if I take this staging. It's now 6 tracks, and I made 2 3-loop tracks. It gave me about an extra foot on the aisle space. It was really amazing that I was able to figure that out. You can see it comes around and it goes out and it comes into the helix and it climbs up into the level that come out. You can see that this is the old railroad in the back. This is what's being saved is Sergeant's Hill and the yard. Okay. The helix was fun. I will never build another helix like this with this kind of a method. I think I'd use a laminate method. I had to put stiffeners under here to make it quit undulating, I guess is the right word. Buy a laser level if you're doing any of this, by the way, it really helps. This is what the new Allison's Corner will look like. If you've ever operated on the railroad, Allison's Corner was a quaint little spot, and now it's really blown up into a bigger area with a lot more industry. So it should be fun to switch. We may even have 2 locals going out there and doing it. So this is where it comes out of staging on the bottom and it comes up. This will be like a nice canyon mountainous run coming up, so nobody has to do anything in there. And then it opens up into Allison's Corner. The yard is over here on the side of a 4-foot aisle, and it bends around the corner. So there's a lot of room to work. I'm presenting to the Redwood Division. Mark Schuster says hello. Okay, and then when it comes into 2 yard leads, which was the design that we had, which was really kind of not working. The original yard came in on a curve. So you can see that this is the main line going in the back, and this are yard leads that come in on the other side. So it should be a fun place for people that love yards. I really love the design here. This is the helix going up to the 2nd level. It's held up by posts on this side and straps on this side. So it has about 10 inches of elevation between there, and this will be a concrete plant under here. So it worked out really pretty nice. This is a picture of what Allison's Corner will look like, or not Allison's Corner, I'm sorry, the yard. The old yard used to get cut off right about here, and it got extended another 3 or 4 feet. So now you can run 30-car trains into it. If you see the circles here, these are the dimensions for the aisle. So I have no aisle that's under 36 inches. So it's worked out pretty nice. We started working on the upper level bench work, and this is what that looks like. And then we got the plywood in on there, and there's another shot of the helix. You can see that it is being supported by things down here. So I didn't have the straps in at that time. Don't know how that slipped in there. Let me go back. This is the problem that I had with my upper staging being up so high. I had to cut a chunk out of the beam. So it worked out pretty nice. I ran the first engine up there and it ran smack dab into the big beam we had to put in to support the roof. So, you know, mistakes happen. So here we go. We're coming out. We're going to go through a canyon scene and we're coming up here. And then it goes into Allison's Corner. And now you can see the upper bench work is in place. Sheet plywoods, it'll be climbing up there. This will be Liberty. Bill, your favorite town. I will make sure that the track is glued down before you operate on it. So there's an inside story there.
I was gonna say, it would be nice if it was nailed down.
We'll make sure it doesn't move this time.
All these nitpickers.
Yeah, I went out and I took a couple of pictures. You can see we're using sheet plywood. This will be Liberty on the inside. And on the outside will just be a run that's climbing in elevation. So there'll be no operators on the outside of the aisle. And this is upper staging here. So the big thing to try and get done is to how do you get from this level up to upper staging? And just another shot. You can see I've still got a lot of stuff left over and I need to get rid of it, keep building. And I thought this was a cool camera shot, but it doesn't really help anybody who's never seen it. So, but it does give a nice view of the room. So this is what I hope Liberty will look like. I'm still in the throes of developing it because I had to move the dimensions back a little bit. So this is a recessed bench work on the Otis yard side. This is a view block. And then this will be where the operator will be in working. And then Otis Yard, if you've ever worked Otis, there's Sergeant's Hill is right above it. I'm hoping to put a city scene above it and move Sergeant's Hill to the side, but Sergeant's Hill may not move. So these are all decisions that are in limbo. And I thought I'd end it with one of your guys. I didn't see Vern here, but he's been one of the regular operators coming over having a good time. And this one's just for you, Paul.
Yeah, inside joke, fine.
And Paul, I had to keep it short, so.
Really enjoyed the update. Do we have questions, comments for Jim? I mean, I'm interested in to what extent have you tried to mimic the prototype? I don't know. Is the Pink Lady sub entirely fictional? Does it have some bearing relative to a prototype or a time period?
Jim Providenza and Bill Kaufman kept telling me I needed to pick a region to help my operators kind of cement themselves. So I chose to make it from Westwood up into Idaho. So it is a fictional railroad. It kind of follows BNSF. We do track warrant control. I'd love to do signaling, but I'm not up to that challenge. So, so it does follow pretty much prototype operations for track warrant control, but trains are a little bit closer than they normally would be. So,
well, that's probably true of every layout. And tell me about the time period. Is there a time period that you've?
1995, based on the fact that I fell in love with the BNSF paint scheme.
Nice.
Just like going to the car lot, picking your favorite color.
Yeah, that's allowed. Anybody else questions for Jim's comments? Anything?
I'm just gonna make a comment that I've seen the thing, and actually I like the presentation because it helped me understand what I was looking at when I actually went and looked at the thing.
Oh, so you've been over there, Bill? Because
Yeah.
I've yet to be invited, but I'm looking forward to.
Yeah,
someday.
you've been
I was
invited.
I was
every
bothering
opposition,
Jim
Paul,
about
regardless of
something
what you
else.
say.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. No, I've never been invited. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Anybody else? Questions, comments? for
I
Jim?
have a comment.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, Jim, how extensive that rebuild was. I thought you were just out in the addition part. And when I saw that you were rebuilding most of the interior, that kind of blew me away. It's
Yeah, I-
really impressive. Really impressive.
I came up with a plan that was gonna go through the Feather River and it would start off at 12 inches off the ground. And I'll tell you, after you've been over a couple of times, you realize that just isn't gonna work anymore. So,
True that.
Do you feel you've arrived at the final configuration? Because it feels like there's been a lot of movement along the way.
yeah, I mean, I just gotta lay out the local track work in Liberty, and I think Sergeant's Hill's gonna stay where it is. My big challenge now is how to make that final connection up to staging, whether it's gonna follow it around again or just do a one loop and disappear. So I'm planning on setting up cameras on staging so they can go into a tunnel portal and see where they go after that. So
I'm actually going to talk about cameras later, so that's great. Thank you for that.
yeah, I will be hitting you up for that information.
Yes, thank you for that segue.
What's been amazing is as you build, seeing your design come to work and it's actually working. So it's kind of fascinating. So
Do you have advice though for someone who's planning a layout? Because I feel like your journey has been following a plan and then realizing things and revising, which is, a lot of us have done. But if you're just getting started, what would you tell such a person who's just getting started? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the reciprocating saw or something.
try something. I mean, I had a fairly decent sized railroad built and I met Jim Providenza and Bill Kaufman. And I went back and I decided to rip the darn thing out, because they showed me operations and it was like, whoa. But don't be afraid to try. Give it a go. Start putting something together.
Jim, do you expect to have the same number of operators as you've had in the past?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe 10 would be a good choice. So we've had 8 to 9, and sometimes we've had 10 to 11. And I think 11 is probably a good number because we didn't seem to always have enough people to run the on the line trains. So with a little more room, you got a little more room to spread out. So I'm really loving the wider aisles and getting things in, but you can see they're still kind of cluttered up with stuff. But once everything gets stored and built, it'll be really nice. And I hope to have this thing at least mainline finished by, say July or August. So
Would you tell people where it goes and starts? Because or are you keeping those names?
I'm keeping most of the names of the towns that were on the railroad originally.
Well,
Nothing has changed, just distance between towns have really expanded.
well, you've got two really clever endpoints that some people don't know about. Maybe
I am an elementary school teacher, and so I'm surrounded by young kids all the time. And so down on the lower level, this is called NOWIP, nowhere in particular. And the upper level is called IAB because I kept having a kid come in and screaming Infinity and Beyond. I think it's from Toy Story or something like that. And I thought, well, that's an appropriate idea. All the names are tongue in cheek. Allison's Corner is named after my daughter who used to sit in the corner of the room right here and play the Little Mermaid. And then we started building, but now it's not a corner anymore. And she's already told me that I'm going to have to change the name. I said, no, we have the Waybills, already.
Right, yes.
So, sorry, you don't get what you want. Just all the names are based on things in my life, 10 years in the Marines and education and tongue in cheek stuff. So it's been a fun freelance prototype and people have taught me a lot of things along the way. So it's been a great experience with all the other model railroaders around. So.
Anybody else before we let Jim go? we can't thank you enough for joining us today, particularly because you have other duties and fun things to do in Watsonville. Thank you, Jim. Loved it.
Well, especially since they've all been coming out here going, hey, man, we want to go eat. So.
Well, this is, you're doing important work here. We love the content. Thank you so much, Jim, and feel free to sign off and eat something if you need to. But
Okay,
I
thanks,
enjoyed having you.
guys. I can't wait to see you guys. I'll see if I can make it to the PCR convention, and it sounds like it'd be fun. So,
Indeed.
all right,
it will.
thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Program note, our next guest speaker is Michael Latant. We'll have him up, and from inside the division, I want you speakers to know what order you'll be appearing, so you can let me know if there's a problem with that, or at least you can be prepared. We have Tom Swearingen speaking today. He'll go first. A new participant in our group, Morgan Desmond, will introduce himself and go second, followed by a very busy person, Jim Providenza, who has found the time to add us to his dance card today. John Schmidt's going to speak. Ed Marin's going to speak. Those of you who are really paying attention will notice that Ed is not here. And much like a big star at the Academy Awards, he can't accept the opportunity to speak, but he has actually gone to the trouble of recording an update for us to view, which is an extraordinary act of Ed's, and we're grateful for that. And finally, the one speaker who's not worth hanging around for, me, I'll go last. So with that said, Michael, you're up. Are you ready? And
I'm ready, Paul.
Let's visit Boston, shall we?
Okay, let's go to share screen and onto the slideshow. Those of you who were here last time, I covered what I called my favorite part of my favorite railroad, the South Boston Freight Terminal on the New Haven Railroad, and I covered the west part of the terminal. The second part is what I'm calling my favorite part of my favorite part of my favorite railroad. And it's the west side of the freight terminal, or more specifically, it's the buildings adjacent to the yards. What I'm looking to model is a naturally compact urban area, apartment size, because I live in a small San Francisco studio apartment, rail-served businesses, variety in building heights, shapes, and construction, interesting operations, a logical need for my favorite freight car types: box cars, refrigerator cars, tank cars with food or chemical items, and the occasional gondola or flat car. Well, I looked high and low, and I found what I was looking for in the west side of the Boston Freight Terminal. This is Summer Street, which was the boundary that we talked about last time. So let me straighten this out a little bit so we can kind of look at it more easily from left to right. And I'm going to zoom in on the area. So this is the part of it that I want to model. If I can fit it into a 12-foot by 2.5-foot space plus staging. And to do that, I'm going to be using building flats, shallow relief structures, and the best friend of all apartment-sized modelers, lots and lots of selective compression. So within this area are a number of interesting elements, and these are the elements that I want to put into this space, even if it means just having one wall or one little piece of it in there. So let me quickly take you on a tour of these buildings and these items. First one is the Boston Market Terminal. This was something that the New Haven put together in 1927 to consolidate their fruit and vegetable operations. And a lot of people then moved their operations from what was the most crowded part of the old part of Boston, the Faneuil Hall Market and the Quincy Market, down to here. It was very successful. In fact, it was so successful that it drew other businesses to the area because of the adjacency to a major rail freight terminal, and also, probably more important, access to truck-capable roads in and out of Boston. So a number of secondary businesses located there, both businesses that built new buildings and new tenants in older buildings. And the buildings I'm going to be showing you were built between 1907 and 1955 or 1950, 53, 55. This part of South Boston was actually opened in 1900, and it went through a number of changes. We have 2 coffee roasters, new tenants in old buildings, produce wholesalers, both new tenants in old buildings and new buildings both, supermarket, meat and produce warehouse in a new building, that's the newest of the buildings, a wine bottler in an old building, a grocery co-op in an old building, and trucking in new buildings, plus more business for the Boston Ice Company. And although this photo was taken probably in the late 30s, they were still using exactly this type of truck with the scissors lift and the wooden bed into the mid 60s. So I'm looking forward to adding a model of that to the area. So taking a closer look here at the number 12 house, the Boston Market Terminal, this is the one closest to C Street. And you can see what a wide street C Street is. In fact, if I were to model it to scale, it would take up about 1/3 of the width that I have available for the layout. So we're going to selectively compress that. This building is about 1,000 feet in length, which would mean it would be the only building I'd have the room to model. So I'm going to squeeze that as well. What's interesting to this is that there are 2 tracks that serve to set out refrigerator cars. One of them stub ended in a bumper. The other went across the street to this building, Coffee, which moved into an old building that Western Electric had for quite a number of years. This is the Summer Street side, the front of the building. If I had the room, I would model this part, and nice looking building, but the side and the rear are what interest me. That spur that came across from the 12 house comes right across here past this low section, which at one time used to have a separate business, which I'll take advantage of, and right inside of this building. So I have a couple of different car spots, a couple of different buildings. Across C Street from that is a cluster of 4 buildings with a very interesting track pattern. Fargo Potato and the Damari Brothers Produce, Bowker Storage across from that, and then across Fargo Street, a couple of wool warehouses. This is the Damari Brothers, formerly Brown Whale Steel Company, and this is the oldest of the buildings. This was built in 1907, and it's a real fortress. And it has a beautiful rooftop sign, Tip Top Brand Tomatoes, Damari Brothers Fruits and Nuts, just a gorgeous building. On the side is a great sign. I happen to love signs painted on the side of buildings for Mellow Red Tomatoes. Along here is Fargo Potato Company, which also rail served. And if you look more closely at that sign, you'll see they didn't quite cover up the word steel from when it was Brown Whales Steel. So nice little nod to the past from there. Behind this building is the Bowker Storage. It's a massive concrete warehouse that was built as a fireproof wool warehouse in 1920. At one time, Boston was the raw wool center of the country. And for a while, it was the raw wool center of the world. So there was a lot of call for fireproof wool warehouses. Unfortunately, after the Depression and the Second World War, all of that business literally went south to the southern United States, and new tenants came in. In the era that I'm modeling, I know that National Starch and Chemical was up here, material equipment, warehouse, and a couple of others. So I'm going to have some fun figuring out some additional businesses for traffic. And together, those 2 8-story buildings form what the typical urban concrete canyon, which I've always loved because you can see the trains disappear and then pop out again. So my version of a tunnel. This is the back view of Damari. Behind here, the track splits into 3 spurs and goes into these wool warehouses. These were built 1917, 1919. There were 3 of them originally, 2 of them left in my era. And at the time they were advertised as the largest wool storage facility in the world. But what I love about them is the rear cul-de-sac, because you've got 2 buildings and 2 completely different construction facings. One side has a platform, one side just has the doors, and there's a roll-up door here with an interior track. So again, just a really nice visual thing to look at, interesting buildings, variety, and operation. The newest building is a Stop and Shop meat and produce warehouse. This is a massive building. And again, we'll get out the old selective compression to work on this, but it generated a lot of traffic. The photo below is the one photo I managed to take of it. The color photos are my photos from the 90s and the early 2000s. If you'll notice, the asphalt has kind of lifted up over the years to show cobblestones, and all of these streets were cobblestone streets at one time. So another nice detail and something very interesting to model. Additionally, the original track plan for this before the warehouse had a line swooping down here to go through these 2 buildings and service what would have been the 3rd of the wool warehouses. Because this building generated so much traffic, the railroad put in a switchback. So here we have a prototype example of a switchback that many people will go, no prototype. Well, there's the prototype for it, and more operating variety. Next, across the other C Street are other produce packers and wholesalers. And these changed over the years. People moved in and out of them. But there are 3 buildings that all different from each other and all interesting that I'm going to combine. I'm going to just move them all next to each other in the interest of space. The one on the left was plumbing fixtures and valve warehouse. The middle one was a banana and tomato warehouse at one time, but the tomato company eventually moved into their old building on the right, which had been a paint and varnish warehouse. So 3 different buildings, all on the same spur, lots of operating interest. And feeding them all was the Bullock Street yard, which was a 9-track yard in real life, and it's going to be quite a bit smaller on the model. The track closest to the street, I'm going to designate as a team track. I think it might have been. There was 1 through track and a number of stubs. And this yard was used to collect cars for the various industries. And I did find some car cards from the mid-60s that in fact were designated for Bullock Street. One on the left is.
I probably won't know about any of my offers until Tuesday. Yeah. But so luck. Thank you. Well, if you want to come
If we
over
could mute everybody.
tomorrow. Okay, yeah, Yeah, right now I've got just the 1 and
Okay.
3, so I may just zip up.
Okay, that may have fixed it. Michael, you've been muted. Come back. We're back live. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, the one on the left is for Stop and Shop. It's a car full of grapes. One in the middle is a car full of canned beans for Pemberton Stores, which was south of the area that I'm modeling. And the third one was for the Bowker Storage and was in fact a car full of starch for their national starch and chemical clients. So you had quite a bit of interesting traffic through here, different kinds of cars. Just above the Bullock Street yard was Victor Coffee, which made its home in a building that originally housed a standard sanitary equipment company. And if you'll notice, this was also served by a switchback. It's a beautiful curved building, a long curved side, one narrow side and one wide side. The wide side features a beautiful painted on sign for Victor Coffee, and the roof has a sign for Victor Coffee. So all in all, it's just a very nice looking model. And last but not least, on the other side of C Street, a couple of interesting buildings. The first was the United National Cooperative Company, known as the National D Stores. And this was a cooperative of creameries that eventually combined their buying power for groceries, dry goods as well. And just, again, different height doors, interesting brickwork, a fixed awning, just a nice building, also rail served. And next to it, the Supreme Wine Company, which originally was Joseph Gann and Son Brewing. They were the local bottler for Schlitz beer. And Supreme Wine moved in 1934. It was an L-shaped building with a spur behind it. And to tell you the truth, when I took this photo, I had no idea of what this was, but I did match up the front from an aerial photo and realized that I had in fact shot Supreme Wine. They sold a lot of wine in big quantities, gallons of dinner wine, California port, California Zinfandel. So that wine had to come in large quantities. So, and vodka as well. So I looked and looked and looked at one of these aerial photos, and I thought I saw what looked like two wine tank cars back behind the building. So I checked out other photos that I had, and sure enough, there's a classic wine tank car in the yard, a single dome car that was refitted to 3 compartments and was a very common type of wine car in the 30s and 40s and into the 50s. One thing that I didn't get to model, again, for lack of room, but it's very interesting, is a traveling gantry crane behind the Herrick Company, which I thought, since the Herrick Company dealt in iron and steel, it was their crane. And I located it on one of the photos. It's a 1925 photo when there really wasn't much going on C Street. Here's an enlargement, but it turned out that that was one of the railroad's cranes. And if I did have the room to put it in, that would give me additional operations with gondolas and flat cars coming in to be unloaded. Well, folks, here's what all that looks like today. Unfortunately, it's all underneath the South Boston Convention Center. So I can't go back there now, but with photos, memories, plans, at least I can recreate what was. So next steps are going to be to, actually plan this out and lay down track and begin to build this layout, which, given that I've put it off for about 25 years or so, I can't tell you exactly when it's going to be built, but when it is, I'll be back here to report on it. So
Awesome.
Thanks for watching.
Michael, that's so good. Very enjoyable, just like the prior presentation. Last time we spoke. Questions, comments for Michael? What an extraordinary deep dive into some of these details of history.
And in fact, something that has a lot of real modeling quality to it in a prototypically small area.
Yeah, just quickly, Michael, I'm wondering what scale you're going to be using for your layout.
It's going to be HO. And
Wow.
I can tell there's going to be a little squeezing and shuffling.
Did you consider going smaller? And if not, why not?
I considered it momentarily, but as I get older, things need to be bigger and bigger for me to see them. So going smaller would be in the wrong direction for me.
I think that's not unique to you.
But it would have been a wiser plan.
Anybody else questions or comments for Michael?
Yeah, Michael, this is a terrific exhibition of what you can do research-wise from a distance. I think your tenacity and your use of various photo sources and so on is really, really awesome. And an example of, maybe if somebody's coming to do a layout in a remembered area that is no more, you're not shut off. You got possibilities, as you've marvelously demonstrated here. It's really valuable.
I do wish that I'd had a, era 2021 camera phone, because I invariably find myself shooting the last shot in a roll of film with other things that came along that were even more interesting than what I had shot. My interest in this was personal. My dad used to drive us through here on our way to my grandparents' house in the 50s. And one of the slides that I cut for time showed a photo of 14-year-old me standing on the caboose steps of a New Haven caboose, spotted just across from Victor Coffee. So that's the other reason I found it interesting.
We want to see that pic.
Next time, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael?
For Grace. Yes.
Yes.
Michael, just point out that the Roma wine car from the convention, if you buy more than one, there's a renumber decal, so you can get as many as 10 of them. So that would serve your Superior Wine Company very well with Roma wine.
That is a great suggestion. Thank you.
And that's a great looking car, that convention car. I want to pick some up too. Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining us from afar again. Very enjoyable. I like the fact that you also reference your eBay searches in at least one of the slides. eBay is a fantastic reference in ways that people don't fully understand. The ability to find things like the things that you pictured from back in the day that someone has collected. I have found a lot of things that were very pleasant surprises. It's a needle in a haystack, but once you find it, it's really fantastic. So in any event, thank you for that. Thank you, Michael. Next up, we have Tom Swearingen, and a reminder, Morgan, you're on deck after Tom. But Tom, take it away.
All right, thanks a lot, Paul. We'll go ahead and start. My apologies to the local operating group who have already seen this. They saw this last year, but I grew up in Richmond, and San Pablo, being right next to Richmond, had a store called A&L Posters. It was A&L Records and then A&L Posters. And I modeled 1967. So during the pandemic, height of the pandemic, I finished or started scenicking this part of the model railroad. And I model loosely Martinez to Oakland. And this one actually ends up being somewhere near Martinez. There was never an A&L poster company building like this. It's all fictitious. But I just had a dock there and I wanted to do something else. Had a lot of parts that I left over from other modeling. So I created this thing. It sits on the second level of a 2-deck layout. It's about a foot recessed, so it's not going to be in danger of being knocked over, which is kind of important. And it's all whimsy too. So it's just a lot of fun. It's one of those projects during the pandemic that I kind of got carried away with. So you can see how it sits here just on a little siding up above. It's looking at it from one angle. This is looking at it from the other, or a little bit further from that angle, and then flip-flopping direction, looking towards Martinez and the backdrop there. So the fun I had in making this was in creating these little posters and then creating the pallets and the boxes. The boxes, I had some packing paper that I just wrapped around, put pieces of 1/4 inch styrene, square, or 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch styrene, just cut it into little pieces. If you look at these posters, they're all of them except for one is accurate for 1967. And I just had fun. Graduate, you could see, anybody remember Raquel Welch and 1,000 Years BC.
Mhm.
You can see the where the cars would line
Yeah,
up
this
there.
group all remembers, Tom.
We are of an age.
So again, just a lot of fun. And then rolling up little itty bitty posters and trying to stick them inside these boxes. I've got an office here. I don't know why the guy's chair's knocked over. I just haven't gone in with tweezers to reset it, but you could say maybe he's mad at his lead salesman or something, but fun creating the Venetian blinds, creating everything here. I am not an architect or a contractor, so my apologies to those who I'm offending with my poor structure, perhaps. One thing I will point out, though, is that the Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced poster is upside down, so that probably gave you a sense that maybe I was being experienced at the moment when I hung that. And that's it.
So wow, that's cool. That's really cool. Anybody have questions?
Speechless.
Questions for Tom about techniques or anything like that? Because like those Venetian blinds, those are quite striking.
Thanks, Paul.
How'd you do it?
Little itty bitty pieces of styrene with very, very fine point tweezers. Little bit of, I think I did those with the CA, not with the styrene weld. Very, very slowly, very carefully.
Yeah, no apparent shortcut, huh?
No.
Cool. Anybody else? Questions, comments for Tom? Thank you, Tom. We appreciate it very
Thanks.
much. Morgan is going to go next, followed by reminder Jim Providenza. Morgan, you're new to the area. Perhaps you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself to us, where you came from, and tell us what you're up to. You're muted, though.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I spent all of my life in upstate New York until about 11 years ago when I moved to, with my wife and I, we moved to the Bay Area to be near our daughter, who went to Berkeley and never came back. So that explains why my layout is upstate New York. Let me open the slideshow. Here we go. Okay. Howes Cave and Eastern Railroad. It's rural, upstate New York, short line. This is a, obviously New York State, it's more schematic than accurate by a lot.
Morgan, if we are looking at a slideshow, you need to share your screen.
I thought I was sharing, sorry, I thought I was sharing the screen.
Dead center on the bottom, the green button, share screen, should be available to you.
I just clicked it. I'm clicking it and I'm not getting it. I see you, Paul.
You see me? That's bad luck.
Well, oh, here it is. Okay. Wow. I got to let Zoom. This is going to be a disaster, folks.
Not one bit. No, don't worry about it.
I'm not good at this business. I'm supposed to let Zoom allow me to share the screen.
Say, if it's asking you, say yes.
It says open system preferences. I don't want to take up all your time with foostering around here, folks.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we continue forward at speed and you can monkey around a little bit?
That is a great idea.
We'll circle back because we're dying to hear what you're up to, particularly because you're new to us. But take your time. There's no worries at all.
Thanks.
Absolutely. With that said, Jim Providenza has the ball with John Schmidt on deck. Thank you, Jim. And you're muted too, by the way, if you're wondering.
Yeah, am I better now?
You're better now.
I'm better now. Well, that's a good thing. So let's see if we can get this up and we'll lead on here. Slideshow. Beginning, thank you. And back here, and we share the screen. And I assume you're now seeing a slideshow with a Pennsy X31B?
We're seeing your whole desktop, so you might want to play the show.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Luckily, nothing incriminating on the desktop.
Well, you know how that is.
Cool.
Okay, we good?
Yes.
All right. So one of the wonderful things about doing stuff on other people's railroads is you get to do things that you otherwise would never get involved in. And somehow I've become the junior assistant freight car guy on the Central Vermont and Northern California. And that led me to looking at a particular car that I said, you know, what is this car? Okay, it says it's a Pennsy. Some of the lettering has been removed by me already. It said it was a furniture car. It had kind of a strange number on it, and it looked like it had absolutely no detail on the roof and certainly almost none on the underbody, but it was brass. Okay, I asked Tony Thompson, he says, well, it's some sort of a Pennsy X31, you know, off the top of his head, wasn't too sure what. And then if you look in the background of the slide, there's this red shiny thing back there. And there's these funny pieces of plastic up front. The red shiny thing in the back, well, back up, stop that. The red shiny thing in the back is one of the brand new AccuRail X31A box cars. So the first of the X31 series box cars. These were these interestingly half-rounded roofs that were meant to get as much of a cubic capacity as possible in the small, you know, relatively small dimensional area allowed in the eastern roads because of tunnels, clearances, and things like that. The pieces of plastic in the front are, the one in the front, very front is, I believe it's Tichy, and it's a guide for drilling grab iron holes. The one on the right is one that I made up, and it's to drill some grab iron holes for the car that we are looking at. And here you can see there's an indentation in the roof where there's supposed to be a drop grab that gets you above the ladder and gets you up to the grab iron, the corner grab that'll be on the roof walk there. It wasn't there. So we're now going into drilling, you know, holes in a brass freight car. And now we're going to scrape off the paint and the primer. It was actually fairly nicely painted, and then unfortunately a strange decal job. But scraping it down to brass so that I can eventually start putting some wood roof walk on there. Before I get to the wood, I didn't want to mess with that because I had to turn the car over to deal with the underframe. And there was no underframe. So here we're working to cut up some channel to create what you see on the right side with the angled ends of it. And it's got this funky sort of a thing down the middle to be a center sill. We're going to add the, you know, side sill. We're not going to add the side sills. We're just going to add the cross bearers because we don't have enough distance. Over here, you can see where I removed the brake cylinder. It was in the wrong place. The car was initially assembled with the whole thing facing in the wrong direction. We changed that around. And here we are. You can see the AccuRail car in the background. It was wonderful to have that because it's a marvelous car, or not AccuRail, Rapido, excuse me. The Rapido car, and they're marvelously detailed, and it gives me the ability to at least represent the various pieces that they should be. Here we've replaced the brake cylinder, We're putting in some of the lines and the brakes from the brake cylinder. And we have the cleave, not the cleave, this is the various parts of the brake rigging. Having done the undercarriage, we're now going to flip it back over and we start on the roof walk with 2x8 scale strip wood and the chopper. I don't know about everybody else, but I've used my chopper so often I've had to replace the underneath of it twice, where the blade has cut through the surface and no longer gives me a flat surface to work on. And I can't tell you how many pieces of 30,000 styrene I've ended up cutting over the years to slip underneath things like corner grabs and grab irons and ladder, rungs in order to get the proper distance. And there's just one more piece. Here you can see the drop grab in the indentation. You can see the corner grabs with a center support put in and a KD brake wheel replacing the one that was there previously. The supports extending out beyond the end of the car for the roof walk. And I think was there, yes, oh, and a cut lever down at the bottom there. And we'll flip back one more time, I'm sorry. You can see, removing the decals that were there previously, as you would expect, left some scars and got down to brass in a couple of spots. Other spots just removed the decal, but others it went down to the primer and then, as I said, down to the brass. You also notice that the capacity is for a much smaller car, and it's a 90,000 pound car. We're talking, so it's not even a 50-ton car, which these were. The roof walk getting painted with a black wash, and very carefully using just some leftover polyscale boxcar red that does a halfway decent job. It'll work perfectly once we get to the weathering. Above the brass car, you can see the Rapido car. Starting to put in the reporting marks, the car number, the various white lines that they required, a new set of capacity, load limit, lightweight numbers. And if you look carefully, that has been put into a block of paint to indicate that this was a reway. And then over on the right, we have the reway information that's still a block with no information on it yet. I once wrote an article for Craftsman that they ran during April for April Fools of how many uses do you have for KD coupler boxes? And I think I need to write a new article is how many uses can you think of for used number 11 blades? What I found is that once you've used one up, you kind of dull down the rest of the edge, and it actually makes a very good little probe for working with single letters, which I'm doing here to get the proper car designation for X31B. And you can see the two different cars there, and you look at the Rapido car down at the bottom. I have changed the, it had a new date on it because it was painted and set up by Rapido as if it was still fresh from the shops when it was built. And we need it to be 20 something years older. So it needs a reway date. It has some graffiti on it. And then the X31B up above it. So then we're going to weathering. We're using, Tony Thompson's blog, Modeling the SP, blogspot.com has a wealth of information about the acrylic weathering process that he uses. My apologies. And there you can see again a little bit better the reway date. And this car is getting just a general gray wash at this point. You can see where I blocked out the information that I've already put on and decaled and gloss coated over, and then blocked it out with some masking tape so that I can weather this car much more severely. And by this time, with the weathering that's going on, the different colors of white have all pretty much blended together. The roof, Vern, I think you're probably still there. You know, how many times have you told me, if it's in the steam area, the roof has to be black, it's not rusty. So, still plays with crayons. This is using Pentel oil pastels to highlight things like rivets and add streaks and things like that. Here's the X31A from Accurail, or I keep saying that, from Rapido, showing the weathering that's involved in it. And the brass car with its reweigh date, its change of numbers, various bits of, you know, railroad graffiti. And it's thanks to Rapido for their wonderful car and their excellent website, which has a ton of information about that fleet of cars. Tony Thompson for his freight car knowledge and weathering techniques, and Paul for having acquired the car in the first place for me to find and say, oh, that needs some work.
Well, yeah, go to somebody that knows how to spell Penzi.
One of the things that's fascinating about the journey of this model car, I bought it not really having any idea, and it arrived. I mean, to me, it was a little more than a toy. It happened to be made of brass, but the astonishing lack of detail and seeing a car which had so little going for it other than brass transformed into a highly detailed model is fantastic. We all see stories about adding details and so forth and so on. This was really a complete rework of a car that had no hope of being you know, comparable to the rest of the fleet. So congratulations on that. We're lucky to have it. Questions, comments for Jim?
And my comment is just how wonderful it is to have somebody like Jim or Tony who are unfortunately appalled by your railroad and your switches and but they're willing to do something about it, and that's marvelous.
And the reference to Tony, which Jim made and you just made, Bill, is very important. The blog is unfortunately named Modeling the SP. By that, I mean, it is of general interest. I have no particular interest in the SP because others are and have done very well with it. The blog is among the best, if not the best on the internet. Great reading. Like Michael has showed us, Tony also has a flair for historical research and coming up with unbelievable photographs to illustrate his points. So no matter what your interest, Tony Thompson's blog is very worth it. And it's the only one I refuse to miss. Not that that will guide you, but it's just another testimonial. Anybody else questions for Jim? Thank you again, Jim. Next up, therefore, John Schmidt. Ed Marin, get ready. You'll be after John. No, he's not here, but that's fine.
Hi, guys. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm just going to talk quickly about two different Arduino projects that I've completed. Both of them are fun and interesting. First one is the effect controller. The second one is yet another grade crossing controller for Arduino. So the okay, why is that not advancing? There we go. So the effect controller that I made for Arduino is basically Seth and I were just chatting, and he said that he had a project for one of his friends, and I said, well, I'll throw together a sketch, an Arduino program for it, and Seth did all the hardware. But it's a sketch to turn on and off effects, things like lights and sound and animation and stuff like that for an Arduino to control your odd things on the railroad. So periodically turn things on and off. So what I designed, of course, each effect is driven by a pin on the Arduino, and if you're just driving an LED, that's all you need. If you're driving something heavier, you need a relay or a transistor to drive a heavier load. But we set it up such that each effect has a probability factor. So, you know, you can say, well, I want this to happen 10% of the time, or I want this to happen to 80% of the time. And okay, so if we turn on the effect, how long do you want it to stay on? And after that duration finishes, how long do you want it to stay off? And then we also built into this sketch a maximum number of effects on at any time. So you don't want everything on the railroad to light up at the same time, or you don't want every relay to be turned on at the same time, which would burn out the Arduino or whatever. So we did put in that kind of a limit. I'm not going to get into the programming, but I am going to show you what the options are, which we're just talking about. This is the data structure. You specify the pin. You specify whether the pin has to be high or low, which is the off signal. Some effects do require a low to be turned on and so on. And then you specify how long you want the effect to run. And then you specify how long you want the effect not to run. And then you specify the probability. So the way this is set up is that the program will cycle through, rotate through this list of effects. And it will turn them on or off as appropriate and based on the probability. So for example, if pin 2, which is the cow effect, I don't know whether it's just moving or what, but if it gets hit, it has a 50% of probability of getting turned on. If it turns on, it runs for 20 seconds and then turns off for 30 seconds and then goes back into the round robin as to whether it should be selected again. So very, very simple, very, very straightforward on how to set up the effects and how frequently you want them to be turned on and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very simple. It took me, you know, just an hour or so to write this thing, and then several tweaks afterwards based on working back and forth with Seth. Other controls here, how many things can you want active at the same time? How often should the main loop run around? Every 5 seconds, and probability base, which is just a parameter. But this, you know, this effect is there, effect controller is there, it works, and if anybody's interested in it, I'm very happy to share the code on that. The other project was yet another grade crossing controller for the Arduino world. There must be 5 or 6 out on groups.io for grade crossing controller. So why did I build another one? Well, I took it as a challenge. Paul, Central Vermont has got multiple grade crossings. Each grade crossing is different. And there are significant distances involved in his grade crossing. So a simple 2-sensor grade crossing controller wouldn't handle it. And I wanted also to allow for train or engine stopping short of a grade crossing. And I also want to allow that you would not have a pulse positive as the train exited the grade crossing. So these are the 3 crossing controllers that we have set up for Paul. We've got South Coventry, Stafford, and Munson. Obviously, you can see the tracks. Here's the road crossing. The red light, the red dots are where we put sensors. So for example, the South Coventry sensor is quite a ways away and must be a couple feet away from the actual crossing. But the siding sensor we put very close here because I didn't want the siding to set off the grade crossing if the train was going to pull up here, not do the crossing, but wait for a meet or something like that. And then there's a sensor at the crossing itself, and then a sensor at the other end for trains coming from the other direction or exiting. Stafford, 2 distance sensors, but it also has a siding here. So there are 2 there are 2 center sensors at the crossing itself. And Munson was set up with a distance sensor here, 2 at the crossing. And it was originally set up for 2 distance sensors. I think when actually we put the sensors in, I think, Jim, you just put in 1 sensor. So, but the issue is, and what I was trying to catch is, for example, a single engine would come through, hit this sensor, crossing signal would go on. If it stopped short, this crossing signal would eventually time out and not go anyplace. If, however, it hit this sensor, we know, okay, well, the train's continuing. And if it's an engine, well, actually, in any case, an engine or a train, once it got past this sensor, once it cleared this sensor, then the lights would stop and the gates would go up. But what I also wanted to do is to make sure that if it were a single engine, it would hit this, and hit this and no more. But I didn't want the crossing to start again if it hit this. So that's all built into it. The other thing that's here, for example, is that for a situation like this, we know that the train is coming in, we hit this, the gates would go down and the lights would flash. But I also do a probability as to which one of these sensors would be ignored as the train exits. So if we know, for example, that this is the main, it's always going to, almost always going to go out of the main, that's fine. It will default to ignoring this sensor. But if we know that it's right hand running and it would always go out on this side, we would set the code so that it would ignore this sensor on exit, but this would still be live. So build in a whole set of timers into this thing. We have hitting the east sensor. There's a wait a bit sex because these sensors can be quite distant. So if you, when the sensor gets hit, you know it's going to be at least 10 seconds before you want to turn the signal on. There's a parameter which says, wait a bit, don't start the signal until 10 seconds. There's also a timeout so that if the distance sensor is hit and the gate and the lights are started, but it doesn't hit the crossing sensor, we'll stop, we'll clear the signals and clear the sensor. So we also have a gate delay. So after the lights are started, there's a couple, you can specify how many milliseconds you want before the gates drop. And the same thing is true on exit. Once the crossing sensor is cleared, there's a gate delay milliseconds for how long before the gates go up. And then there's also a light delay milliseconds for how long after leaving the crossing sensors, the lights stop. And again, a timeout on this end so that if the train stopped here, everything would get cleaned up anyway. So that's why and what I built in the grade crossing controller. I have one more enhancement thinking about it because we're using SET's fingers to use sensors. They are basically optical transistors, and they're a little too sensitive. So the next iteration of this is going to allow us to specify the sensitivity of the sensors. And I know that we've had some issues with that because there's skylights in the central Vermont area, and a bird flying by the skylight or somebody just walking by and interrupting a light would trigger the crossing light. So we'll fix that. So if anybody's interested in this, I'll be very happy to send you the code or whatever. There's my email, and any questions?
I will say that these are really neat. John's done a lot of work and we're just getting used to living with them on the layout. And they really do everything that you would expect that they would do trains stopping short and having the lights time out is really excellent and fun to watch, because obviously that's how the prototype would go, and just seems complicated, but the results are very elegant and wonderful to stand by and rail fan when a train goes by. And I think when they first went in, it might have been a month or 6 weeks ago, I kept calling people over, come watch a train go by, and it was just, added so much to the experience to have those working so well. Comments, questions for John from there? Before we continue, Morgan, should I check in with you? How do you feel? Should we give it a try or?
Well, I couldn't find anything out. I checked some things. Can we just try it again? One thing I
By all means, yes.
one thing I thought of, did you give me permission to share screen? I think that has to happen.
Al's in charge of that, and Al's nodding his head yes. Is
Yes,
that
I
correct?
did. Yes, I did.
Okay. So I'm going to click on share screen and let's see what happens.
Not a lot happening.
It says open system preferences to allow Zoom. Oh, security and privacy. Okay, let me quickly check this.
And you don't have to be quick. We can have Ed Mern's presentation and come back if you like a few more minutes. No problem.
Of course.
Did you say I should go on or should we wait? Either way.
Go on, move ahead. And
Fantastic. We'll move ahead. And that means I have to share my screen. As I mentioned, Ed Mern's not here. He's doing some Brainiac something in Southern California. But because I wasn't invited to any Brainiac stuff, I'm here, and he made this movie for us. So let me give it a try. That's my presentation for later. But first, let's do this. See how we do.
Well, welcome to my little brief update on my layout activities. And hope you're all enjoying yourself while I'm far away. Not everybody knows about my HO Northwestern Pacific, but there is information available elsewhere, and I have a series of links on the screen as a write-up, as well as a bunch of videos, and there are clinics that I have presented in the past.
Oh, I'm not seeing his. I'm hearing it, but I'm not seeing it.
There are also some other clinics that I presented to other organizations. So if you want to get any of this stuff, be sure to get in touch with me at my email address down below.
I want to try that again. I'm not sure what's going on here. So sharing is pause.
That was not Ed's voice.
Indeed, it seemed to me it was. However.
And we'll move on. During the pandemic, I have not been operating, as you can well imagine.
Is that working?
But I've had a lot of activities that
I see a picture and I hear him.
To one of these three categories. And the one that we're going to spend most of our time on today is the one at the very bottom, which is the water for the Petaluma River. And the other areas, I'll just give a quick glance at just to show you that I'm up to something. The first is these precision scale brass cars that I, after practicing on some Ken Kidder baggage cars, I built up the courage to attack these precision scale cars. And there they are lettered for Northwestern Pacific. They're pretty good duplicates of actual cars on the NWP. I'm currently testing them, road testing them basically. Then we have the industries in Sebastopol for the Petaluma and Santa Rosa Railroad. And I have one here, VacuDrive, which is a real entity that existed, but the building is totally imagineered. I had no adequate information on physically, what the appearance was. So I made this up. Turned out it isn't correct, but that's okay. VacuDry was a very important industry in Sonoma County for many years. It closed in 1999. It closed the facility, and but you can still get some of their products, all dried fruit. I hope it was good. Then we get to the water. So about 15 years ago, I constructed the Petaluma River, which was basically masonite floor, masonite bottom, which I painted with house paint, and the banks were Homosote plywood sandwiches, beveled off a little bit. So it's been waiting for a long time, and finally I decided to get down to it. My original plan was to pour in either resin or acrylic gloss, and wound up really favoring acrylic gloss because I don't have good ventilation in the garage, and I didn't feel like putting up with smells. But I accidentally found this video prepared by Dave Ferrari on a different technique using a textured painted bottom with multiple layers. We're talking at least 10 of Mod Podge, which is a great and interesting and craft material that's taken the world by storm if you can use the internet traffic as a result, not just model railroading. So I gave it a shot. I gave it to practice on this little piece of the Russian River, and I liked the way it turned out. So my plan was to do this on the Petaluma River. Here's preparing the riverbed. I had to get the banks basically all fixed up. And there they are. And then foliage, patterning into the what I was doing with photographs, and the pilings have to be weathered and made to look grungy to some extent with a high water mark and so forth. And that is done with washes and so forth. And found a paintbrush that was just the right width, which was kind of made things a little easier. And then we painted the bottom with acrylic paints, and the colors are mostly cerulean blue and black with some twinges of green and a little umber instead of black in some areas, but basically cerulean blue and black. And you dab it on there rather than brush strokes, and that way you get a patterned or a bumpy or whatever, a textured kind of look to it. And here's some more of it. Then you put on the Mod Podge, and there you are. It starts to dry. Here's a second coat of Mod Podge, and then we had problems. Probably because of the severe environmental circumstances, meaning cold days and freezing nights. Even though I was waiting 24 hours between coats, we're not getting adequate drying before putting the next coat on, which means you don't get an adequate clearance of the white stuff. So I made a number of attempts to try to make that better. I painted it over and started over, still having problems. Finally, I decided to give up on it. I mixed the paint colors into the Mod Podge and put the final layer of Mod Podge as a river bottom that was painted. And this is how it looked. And then I got ready to pour my acrylic gloss, and there that goes, and developed some cracks while it was drying that I have to repair. Still working on that actually, but for today's presentation, I wanted to get some photos of how things were looking. And you can see that there's lots of ripples and patterns. which I might add to later with an overcoat or might not really sure. And I'm also not sure if exactly how I'm going to put the wakes behind the boats that are moving. There's 3 boats moving on the surface, and that they will have wakes and so forth around them. And but what we wind up with is finally Water Street has water in front, running next to it. So I'm pretty pleased with how things are looking. So that's the end of the show. And thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.
How nice of Ed to do that for us. We appreciate it. Ed, if you have questions for Ed, tough, he's not here. But do, because so many of us know Ed, do send him an email and thank him for the extraordinary effort of making a presentation for us, even though he's not here. I'm next, unless Morgan, you're feeling confident.
Well, I found something that might work. I found a place to click to give permission to do it. So let's just try it.
Yes, let's try it. No points off if it doesn't work.
I'm going to click on share screen.
Yeah, you'll click on share screen on the bottom in the center.
Okay, I clicked on the, no, this is not working.
Not working. Okay, well, we can't thank you enough.
I just have to figure this out in the meantime. And
we'll figure out another time. Welcome to the group. I'm sorry it's a bit of an inauspicious beginning, but we're overjoyed to have you on board.
Well, thank you.
All kidding aside. Now, hopefully I had better luck. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again, and I'm going to wrap up today with a presentation. Let's go over here. Fantastic. Yes, yes, you can be a Jedi. I love cameras. The guys who are collaborating on our layout know that I'm a little bit of a camera junkie, but I am surprised at how many layouts I visit that could benefit from a camera or 2, or in the case of our layout, about 10. It's easy, it's amazing, it's a crowd pleaser. People stop and they often are more focused on the monitor than they are in the train. So let's talk a little bit about how to do this. Foolishly, because I don't know what I'm doing, I've spent all kinds of money on different cameras, different sizes, trying to get this right. Those of you who remember closed circuit TV, just like this little clip art here, big, small, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, running at all kinds of different voltages. And I've solved all that for you. It's all done. All you have to do is follow me, and it's cheap and it's easy and it works. This is the upper level track plan of our Central Vermont layout. Many of you know it. This is a track plan that came from the NMRA magazine. We blundered into getting an article written about the layout last year. And I wanted you to focus on the top left corner here, which is where in a fairly important section of the railroad, the track goes behind the backdrop, right? I would say the length of that run is 8 to 10 feet. And that 8 to 10 feet of blind spot, it's not a problem, it's just irritating. You know, a train goes in and you don't know if it's coming out, you don't know if everything's okay. And you're kind of relieved when the train comes out, just like it's supposed to. It's dumb, right? Here's a quick drawing of it, and not very complicated. I added a couple of cameras. I love this camera, $29. It's small, it's pre-wired. It spins in its little holder, so there's all kinds of different orientations possible. It's very high definition. See, it says in the description, 1,200 lines of resolution. So it's really an amazing $30 item, and it fits everywhere, as I'm going to show you. It's a 12-volt system, so you're not going to injure yourself if you don't know anything about electronics, or if you put your tongue on it, maybe, but generally speaking, you'll be fine. And people forget, we're so into the Zoom calls and the whole thing, there's no computer involved, right? This is closed circuit television, so it's just a power supply, a camera, and a monitor. Here's the monitor for the entry-level player. These are kits that are built if you, for some reason, have a 1960 vintage car and you're dying to have a backup camera and you want to drill the hole in the back and put this ridiculous camera over your license plate or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me. My cars are newer than this, and I have a backup camera, as many of you do. But this little monitor is a really terrific way to start for 70 bucks. You're going to throw away the camera, you're going to throw away the converter for the power, and you're just going to use this little monitor. Here's the wiring diagram. Yep, it's this simple. There's one cable that's going to run between the camera and the monitor. It's a special cable that'll carry the power and the video signal, and you'll have a wall wart that goes into the wall. That's all there is to it. So to solve this particular problem, I dropped 2 cameras. I mean, you could tell there's a lot of genius that went into this, right? 2 cameras, one pointing in each direction, you know, in a spot where you can really get a sense of where the train is. Here's the picture of the layout. This is Willimantic, Connecticut on the layout. It's one place where the layout is just a single level. And there in the back, you can kind of get a sense of the upper level right here in the back, where this is where it's going behind the backdrop. And here up top, I've mounted these 2 monitors at an angle, just so you can see the train going. And sure enough, every time a train goes through there, people stand and their mouth and their tongue hangs out and they watch the monitors. This doesn't give you a good sense of the color, but this is the left and the right. I went up there with some really crappy plastic trees and an old car and whatever. And so it's kind of scenic, right? There's actually in the right monitor, there's a bridge we dropped in to kind of block the exit portal from this little area. And people think they're witnessing something very special. The train goes by this relative dead spot. So easy to do that, and highly recommended for any place where you have a bit of a blind spot, and so easy to do. So now let's talk about the next level of what we were trying to achieve on the layout, monitoring trains that are on the layout. They're not in a blind spot, but the operator needs to see what's going on, and to try to do that in a way where the camera is very discreetly placed. So let's talk a little bit about the way we're doing things on our layout. The combined office, there are 2 agent operators when we operate, and they each are responsible for 2 towns. This one is the combined office for Norwich, Connecticut, and Stafford Springs, Connecticut. Let's talk a little bit about what the agent operator does. If you're not familiar with the job or haven't done it before, the operator serves as the eyes, ears, and the mouth of the dispatcher. In our case, a dispatcher is off-site in a different little building. The operator is monitoring train movements in their town and providing information about train movements to the dispatcher, transcribing and delivering train orders that are issued by the dispatcher, delivering them to the crews. There's various other local duties that are beyond the scope of what we're going to do today. But on the prototype, as you all know, you're visualizing a person sitting in a tower or a bay window or station somewhere. There's a view of the left horizon and the right horizon. And they're using the information they glean by seeing a train coming and talking to the dispatcher. So we wanted to kind of replicate the sense that you have 2 views of the horizons. That's what we're doing here. So let's talk about what's here in the office. There's a phone. Actually, there's 2 different lines. There's a phone going to the dispatcher. Notice a proper vintage phone, rotary phone here. And there's also a train line in case a train crew is out on the property and picks up and needs to talk to anybody. John Schmidt in particular spent a lot of time working on the circuitry and the modeling of these train order boards. If you have to stop a train in order to issue an order at one of the towns that you're responsible for as the operator, these are the train order boards. There's an official clock. The fast clock runs now at 2-to-1 time. So a 12-hour prototype day takes 6 hours. And what we're here to talk about today are these monitors. There's a view of the north and south horizons at Stafford and a view of the north and south horizons at Norwich on the right. You'll notice from this quick view that we've spent a lot of time having the camera view look prototypical. There's no other nonsense in the view, and we'll explore that a little bit more further. This is the other office for Willimantic, Connecticut, and Palmer, which is down the hall. So let's talk about Palmer, Mass. The first thing I want to say about this scene is Tom Swearingen is our Picasso and has done the backdrop, which made this from a pretty crappy plain blue backdrop scene to something that's really special. This is the camera location. And the first question, it's a trick question, where's the camera? It's not visible from the aisle, no one can see it. That hillock that is created there in the foreground is where the camera is. This is the view that the operator has looking at the monitor, right? I love this particular view. It's really cool when a train comes through because you're kind of down low and you have a sense that you're standing trackside as this train approaches town. I will say that this monitor that we were just looking at going back here, this is an upgrade option. It's not necessary. It's $150 and I wanted to lean into this and spend a little money. This is a high resolution. You can see I flagged 1280 by 1024, really high quality screen because I wanted the operator to enjoy the precision of the camera and the quality of the scene in the backdrop painting. Also unnecessary, but fascinating to me. I didn't realize this until much later. These little lenses, it's called an M12 lens, they're interchangeable. Many of these in this kit from Amazon for $90, many of these aren't going to work for a model railroad. You can see up front, they're fisheye. So there's very extreme zoom and very extreme fisheye. I had a lot of fun in each of the scenes working through different lenses and finding one that captured what I wanted. I did not want to include the aisle. I didn't want to see fat guys in my view. I wanted to see just the train like the operator would.
I beg your pardon.
No, I didn't mention any names. I'm in the category. So again, looking back at the scene here at Palmer, that's what the camera captures. And this is the reverse scene. That's me in my t-shirt looking back. And you see the camera is just very simply sat right there underneath the hill. No one can tell it's there, believe me. It's well hidden and simple to do. The other technique that we used is behind fascia mounting. I'm calling your attention to it, and you can, as soon as you see the arrows, you can tell what's going on. Nobody mentions it. No one thinks about it when they visit the layout. The resulting views are quite good. At the left looking north and the right looking south, really have a sense of nothing else in the scene other than a train coming. The other thing we've designed with John's help is, many of you know the prototype term, a train is on the bell. When a train is approaching this scene, not when they're leaving, because we don't care about when they're leaving town. We just want to know when they're coming. When a train is approaching, there's a bell signal for the operator, which is timed so that they can kind of look up and get a sense that the train's coming and not miss it because they're picking their nose or doing who knows what. We hate that. So that's a sort of an addition to the multimedia experience. Finally, this is something we're working through now in structure mounting. These are quite obvious, these boxes that I've painted. There's a camera in each of these boxes. What's been interesting to me, they're not decorated yet because I wanted to just get the camera part first. No one who's visited the layout says, what the hell is that? Right? Which surprises me. And you can see it doesn't look like a building. However, how easy it would be in both these cases to wrap the building in brick, add some windows and doors or whatever, and it could be any one of a whole number of things. So love this. It provides tremendous flexibility. And in each case, even though you can't see all the way around, the camera is sort of peeking out the corner of this little cube. So whether you're on this side or the other side of this little so-called structure, you can't see that there's a camera in there. And here are the views that result. Same thing. It's all railroad, no aisles, no wherever. So you enjoy this ability to perfectly position to do what you want to do. I was in Tap Plastics yesterday so I could grab this photo of what we're working with. As you can see from the caption, these are under $3 little boxes. They have great use. This is twice as tall as I needed, so I cut it in half, flipped it over, blah, blah, blah. Just a great thing to know about. So next level, right? Having achieved some comfort with monitoring trains, here's the big prize if we can make it work. Here is the track plan for the lower level. And down here at the bottom, if we get rid of all this other noise, down here at the bottom is the entrance to our big yard. ENL yard stands for East New London. There's different numbers floating around, but that long side of the building on the right, that side of the building on the right is 30 feet long. So the yard is 60 or 70 feet long. And this is the entrance point. And we have a new job that we're creating in a separate office, the chief clerk. The chief clerk is responsible, among many other things, of keeping a complete inventory of what's in the yard, including what moves within the yard and what arrives. the chief clerk's job includes walking arriving trains and, among other things, checking for broken seals and so forth and so on. We'll talk more about that in another episode. However, is it possible, and I believe it is, to put a camera mounted trackside at the entrance point to the yard and have a monitor in the back of the building in the clerk's office where he can see enough of the train to be able to identify the cars as they roll by? I don't think this has been done before, and maybe there's a good reason why, right? Including the necessity that a train needs to roll by at an acceptable speed. But here's the general idea. This is the scene we're talking about. Again, we're here at the top of this yard. Here's the scene we're talking about. For whatever reason, there's some trucks that got thrown there, including a Santa Fe truck. We're in Connecticut. There's no Santa Fe truck, but leaving that aside. You get the idea that here's my hillock. There's a camera behind here. I dropped in this freight car in the right position, and you could see from the monitor that the camera allows an extremely easy read of this number. You may also recognize that this is the cheapo rear backup camera monitor. In fact, what we've done in the clerk's office, which I forgot to take a picture of, is I've got a big screen TV, right? I've got like from an extra one from my house. There's a big screen TV. It's maybe 36 inches wide. It's maybe a 42-inch screen that's sitting on the desk of the chief clerk. So he's going to get this same view, very, very large. And I can report, you have to trust me on this, it's really cool to see a train rolling by at 4 or 5 scale miles an hour and sit there and watch, and you feel like a human looking up at this big screen. Whether or not they'll be able to do it or whether it will prove to be too much trouble, who knows? But it's innovative, it's fun, and it just shows another one of the many uses for these cameras. That's it. Again, in conclusion, a very easy install, depending on how you do it, very affordable, extremely flexible. And there's so many places where you could use this: behind backdrops, in stations, curing blind spots. Jim Radke at the beginning today talked about some of his needs for cameras and staging and helixes. And then, of course, making sure that your visiting crew isn't raiding your home fridge. Obviously, you can have a camera right there. You can bust anybody who's having too many beers. Cameras are a crowd pleaser, highly recommended, and I hope you'll follow along. That's it in terms of my presentation today. There's more about our layout at the website. For the first time, I'm able to say, now that the world's opening up again, that we are doing stuff on the layout in Novato every Tuesday and most Fridays. If you're interested in finally getting out of the house, coming, taking a look at what we're doing, playing with some trains while we get ready for operating sessions, I certainly hope you'll reach out to me. If you don't know where it is, that's good. You'll have trouble finding it, but we'll help you find it. So reach out, let me know. I think that's the end of everything we have to do today. Ran a little bit over. I do aspire to 90 minutes, but we got you in under 2 hours. How happy we are that you all have joined us. Does anybody have closing questions or remarks? If not, we'll let you go enjoy a beautiful day here in Marin County. Anybody? Questions, comments, or ads?
Best meeting of this type I've ever seen.
Aren't you sweet to say so? Your check's in the mail.
Please sign up for the convention. The
Yes.
registrations are important.
Yes, and the convention card too. The convention card looks good. So do what I say, not what I do. Come to the convention.